You have put together your best season, a historic season. How has that felt to you to have this best season under your belt now?
It's a little bit hard to put into words, actually. I mean, this season was absolutely beyond really my wildest dreams, but in some ways, in every moment and every race and every step of the way, it was just sort of, we were so focused, my team and I, we were so focused on just the task at hand, like just that race and performing and just me skiing well, that I don't know, I guess we never really took a step back and looked at the big picture that much. And then the last races of the season were, I guess, 5 days ago now, last race, and all of a sudden it was over. And everyone was like, congrats on this historic season. And I'm like, thanks, I guess.
Has it hit you yet?
No, I guess that's what I'm saying. It's sort of like having this weird out-of-body experience where you look back and I can't believe this season actually happened. And now we're in the off season again, and preparation for next year starts essentially now. But it's pretty surreal.
You've also talked about it being your happiest season. Do you think that the happiness is coming from the success, or that the success is coming from the happiness?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. But I think a huge part of the success this season has been my willingness to let go of expectations, not only outside expectations from, I don't know, fans or media or whatnot, but also my own expectations. And finally stopping, arriving at races and expecting that I'm going to win, or expecting that I should win. And if I don't, it's a disappointment. I still have that goal, but it's like there's a difference between goal and expectation. And I feel like if I'm keeping my standards high and my skiing at a high level and my goals are there, so I have this motivation, then the expectations don't need to be a part of it at all. And that's been definitely a change, and something I've sort of been realizing and understanding more this season. And it's made a really big difference because I've been able to enjoy it a lot more.
Is it tough to balance those two things? High standards, low expectations?
Yeah, because it's such a fine line. I mean, it's on a race day is kind of funny because it's this sort of emotional, physical, and mental roller coaster. At start to finish probably lasts, it's the entire day, but you're only taking 2 runs versus a training day where you're out there lapping for anywhere between 3 and 5 hours, but skiing the course multiple times, 5 times, 10 times, 12 times. A lot. You're getting all this repetition. So I always felt like training was so much more productive than races, because a race you only get 2 runs and you're racing, so you don't want to change your skiing or do any, work on things. You're sort of just like, go with what you got. And that was always something that kind of frustrated me about racing, not to mention the fact that, the racing is, in theory, why we do it. So that's kind of the job part of it. And I don't know, I always felt that, like, that added pressure, that added expectations, and it was always difficult to, I have amazing training skiing, but then putting into the races was tough. But
well, what do you attribute your success this past season to? Is it possibly any changes to your routine, or is it just doing that routine more and more and more and just building up your level?
I think the practice is a huge part of it. Well, actually the practice is the only part of it.
Okay.
As I get older and I get more time on snow and just kind of my cumulative hours of training, that makes the biggest difference. But then it's also the entire team around me, my coaches and my serviceman who prepares my skis, and all of those people it's like all of the, cogs that are meshing together, and it works really well. It's working really well right now. And I feel like we all have the right goals in mind. And like you said, if it's difficult to separate expectations versus standards, and I feel like my whole team got that this year. So maybe every now and then, like, I was kind of starting to talk about race days and got a little bit off track. Throughout the day, I go through moments where I'm like, thinking about winning and thinking about what it would mean and what people would think and what they'll say, and or what if I don't win and what will people say then, and will they be disappointed or something like that. And I've had races where I've won and people were disappointed because I didn't win by a bigger margin.
Seriously?
Yeah, so that's where like those expectations, I'm like, how do I make you happy?
That must be a lot of pressure.
What do you want from me? Well, it was, until I was kind of like, well, it's sort of all in the eyes of the beholder and they can think what they want. But it's also, I think, for the most part, media or fans or whatever, they're also feeding off of my emotions. If they see me coming through the finish and I'm sort of like, whatever, I have a certain emotion, and I'm like, I need to start being a little bit more excited if I have a good race. And not necessarily, I mean, I'm sort of known for not having a finish celebration right when I've come through the finish line and kind of, like throwing my hands up in the air. Sometimes I do, but for the most part, I often have like a sort of stone face, and I'm just trying to register what happened. I'm trying to find my time and to see if I actually won. And I'm trying to think back on my run and kind of register what, like I said, process what happened. And for me, it takes a lot more time to process than it seems a lot of other athletes
Okay.
need.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that part of your personality to not have that celebratory expression, or is that a conscious thing that it's not? Is it hitting you and you're not showing it, or is it not hitting you?
It's not hitting me. That's kind of the issue. And I have gotten a lot of people who are like, you won, why aren't you happy? Or maybe you didn't win, but you had a podium, so like smile and wave. And I sort of just figured out at some point this season, well, actually one of my competitors, but also one of my friends on the circuit, Ilka Stuick, who's a speed skier from Slovenia, she said, kind of was asking me about my reaction to one of the races this year. And I was like, well, I was just trying to process what happened. And I just needed a little time. And of course, the camera's right on you in the finish, trying to get your immediate reaction. And I was just stone-faced. And everybody thought I was mad, and I wasn't mad at all. I was actually really, really happy and excited about the race. But even my own team kind of saw it and was like, it just seemed like everybody didn't really know what to think about the day, basically because of my reaction. And she said, just smile and wave. It's literally like the penguins in Madagascar. You just smile and wave. It's your like stock reaction, and give a little bit of something. You can still be processing, but just make that your go-to, like, ah. And I was like, oh, that's probably really good advice, because I have run into this issue so many times where people like, what are you thinking? And why is it just takes me that long to process it. And like I said, I still haven't processed this entire season. I probably haven't really even processed winning a gold medal from Sochi more than 5 years ago now. So I don't know. I don't know how anybody can process that kind of stuff, but maybe I just don't have that emotional like capability or something.
Well, when you talk about processing things, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, you are at 24 years old, 60 World Cups. You are very close to Ingemar Stenmark's 86. 86. You're like right on the heels of this. Have you thought about the magnitude of that?
I have in a way, but I mean, first off, breaking the all-time wins record has not really been on my radar. It hasn't been one of my goals. And that's not to say that I'm like not going to achieve it or don't want to. It's just that it hasn't been the thing that's driving me. And I sort of found myself in this position where now I have 60 wins, but it's not like, it hasn't been on accident. I mean, my whole team, we've all been working really hard, taking it step by step, race by race, day by day, and focusing on my skiing first and foremost. And that's where I said, like, the high standards. I'm looking for every single day when I go out there, I'm looking for specific, like, my good technique, good tactics through the course, like all of those pieces that make me feel like I am and deserve to be the best skier in the world. And that's sort of aside from winning. The winning and the trophies and the records and all that, it's like confirmation. But really what I'm looking for is to look at my video and see my skiing and say that, like, that's good skiing, that's fast skiing, and that deserves to be winning the race or being deserves to be holding this title. And that's kind of where, like, when you talk about records or breaking this all-time win record, to me it gets a little bit, it's sort of a kind of a gray area, because the fact is that there will be people in the world who, no matter what, always thinks Ingemar Stenmark was the greatest ever, no matter how many wins I get or anybody else ever gets, because he did it in this, in a generation and kind of early stages of the World Cup circuit, and he was so dominant and so just on such another world from everybody else. And his record stood for so long, like the only person who's even come close to touching it is Lindsey. So that's something, like, I don't know, I think and maybe myself included, there's always going to be like, well, you can't take that title away from Ingemar. But on paper, maybe I could accumulate more wins, so then I'd be like the greatest of all time, but I don't necessarily see it that way. Right now, I can see it as simply like, I'm the best in the world, and I have to keep working if I want to stay there. Yes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let's talk about Lindsey. She's retired now, and even on the men's side, there is not that dominant skier. I mean, you're it. Obviously, you've talked about your own expectations and the expectations of the fans, but Team USA is looking to you now. How do you handle those expectations that are coming from exterior, not interior?
I mean, I guess the great thing is that over the last 8 years, those outside expectations have been developing. I don't think a lot of people ask me, as kind of when Lindsey retired, sort of the day she retired, people were like, do you feel the spotlight shift? And I was like, not really. I think
giant light, like,
yeah, it just shined on me, and I can't get rid of it. No, I don't. I mean, I think that has been developing in much more natural manner over the last 8 years since I kind of broke through on the World Cup circuit. And a big portion of my career, Lindsey was winning, but there was also a big portion of my career where she was injured and making her comebacks. And during the period of time when she was injured, there was, I would say there was quite a bit more spotlight on me than I expected, than anyone expected. And I've been dealing with it for a lot longer, to the point where I don't feel like it's something to be dealt with anymore. It's just, there's expectations, people have it. And that's what I was talking about this year. That's something that's been different and so amazing for me, is that I've been able to enjoy it despite the expectations, and feeling like, because of that, I all of a sudden, like, when you stop caring what other people think, then you're just so much happier. Like, knowing that you're not going to make everybody happy, and there's always going to be somebody who says, like I said, no matter how many wins I get, there will always be people who say Ingemar's the greatest, and I'm okay with that, And there will always be people who say that Lindsey's the greatest, no matter how many wins I get or how many, even though she didn't break his record, that's still because they're her fan or they're his fan, or of course I have plenty of fans too. So that's kind of part of the greatness of the sport, is that there doesn't have to be only one winner ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems like it's liberated you in a lot of ways to kind of make that shift.
Yeah, it has. I don't know if it's going to be able to. I'll do my best to keep control of it all and make it stay that way. After a season like this, it's sort of like you think, oh, it's hard to top that. And I'm one of those people who's always trying to top whatever I've done before. But I think the greatest thing about this season was that I was just able to keep my focus on the things that are important to me throughout all the talk of records and statistics and numbers and everything. And that made it so much more enjoyable, and not only a record-breaking season, but my happiest season ever.
Well, when you mentioned Ingemar's record, and you're a lot closer to Lindsey's record, when she was exiting the sport, some people were saying they sensed some tension between the two of you. Is that a fair reading?
I think we've had a relationship. We don't really know each other that well. I've had a lot of respect for her. I think it's just a mutually respectful relationship. But I do think that throughout our entire careers, people have naturally seen our sort of relationship as an easy target. So kind of pit us against each other. And that hasn't been super easy because, you know, I don't know every single article that's ever been written, but I've seen a few where it's like words that I've said have been taken out of context, or words that she said has been taken out of context. And if I ever see that, I'm always try to bend sure to like text her immediately and be like, this is not what I meant. That's not what I said. I'm sorry. But it's still kind of, it gets in there. It kind of, I'd say, taints the relationship. So people saw tension. It's kind of like, it's sort of like this there's a bubble and then there's what's outside the bubble, and what everyone's seeing outside the bubble, it's not really what's true. But it definitely hasn't been maybe the easiest thing, I think, for either one of us, because like I said, there's a lot that has happened that she has seen that I haven't seen, and a lot that I've seen that she hasn't, that sort of taints the relationship. And if it was just as simple as ski racing and not all of the extra noise and chaos, I mean, that's where I'd say the media, the social media, the spotlight can definitely be an issue, because it would have been as simple as just being like us respecting each other and me being really impressed by her incredible career.
Well, and if and when you break her record, people are going to be talking about her connected to you again. Is that something you're okay with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for me is that people start seeing me as my own entity. Like, I'm me. I'm Mikaela Shiffrin. And for the longest time in my career, people were talking about me being the next Lindsey Vonn. And that was another thing that has I think been really tough. And I can imagine it's been frustrating and tough for her, because she is the greatest that our sport has seen of this generation. I mean, barring whatever I do, that's hers. And she's a legend in the sport. So when people start saying, oh, you know, the next Lindsey Vonn is here, it's kind of like, all right, Lindsey, you know, thanks for what you've done. Now go. And I think she started feeling that starting 8 years ago. And most of the wins, like some of her most important wins, happened during my career. So it's not like she was done. You know what I mean? I think that, I imagine that must have been really difficult and frustrating for her. And a message that I do want to get out to young athletes is, you know, see your idols, watch them, be inspired by them, look to them for motivation and kind of helping you determine how you want to, you know, what your path is going to be. But be you, you know, do it your way. Be you. Don't be the next Lindsey Vonn or the next LeBron James or the next be better, because you're you and you're going to do it your way. And no matter what, I think it's important that I understand it, that the media wants something to make it relatable, and they're saying, like, you know, Mikaela Shiffrin, she's on a track to be this good and as good as Lindsey, but to me, it's a totally separate thing. I'm myself, and I finally felt like people have seen that and taken it for what it is. And so if I get close to her record, or if I break her record, I'm hoping that it would be the kind of thing they're separate, because it doesn't take anything away from what she accomplished in the sport. And if I don't, it doesn't take anything away from what I accomplished in the sport.
Well, and that leads perfectly into my last question. When you're saying, be you, be Mikaela, you're 24, you're at the top of the sport, you're coming more and more into the limelight. What is one thing that you just want everyone to know about you?
One thing I want everyone to know about me. Interesting. I sing in the shower. Just kidding. I don't know. There's not one thing right now that I want everybody to know. You know, I already talked about the kind of a message I want to get out there to the young kids, like, you know, be yourself and be okay with that, and force everyone else to be okay with that, because it's really all you can do. That's kind of all I'm trying to do right now. It has nothing to do with records. It has nothing to do with all these statistics, even though it's an honor to even be at the point in my career where I'm mentioned in the same sentence as these records. what I'm trying to do is just push the limits of the sport and push my own limits. And I think there's so many different ways you can label a career, but by the end of my career, if I'm able to say that I took women's ski racing to another level, that's amazing.
Well, you're certainly on that path, and I hope that we get to catch up when you've had some more time to really process all of this. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. And Mikaela, we're so glad you decided to stop by and spend some time with us.
Thank you.